Welcome to Life Stories. Have you ever felt like the forgotten one in your own family? Like no matter how hard you try, you're always left standing in the background while someone else gets all the praise? That was Emma's life until one Christmas morning changed everything. What started as disappointment led her on a journey of independence, betrayal, and ultimately, triumph. Through passion, resilience, and the love of cooking, she learned that true success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. Subscribe to the channel to begin today's story with Life Stories. The sound of excited squeals and laughter drifted up from our driveway, cutting through the stillness of Christmas morning. I stood at the kitchen window, my fingers curled around a warm mug of coffee, watching as my younger sister, Madison, jumped up and down beside a brand new red Volkswagen Beetle. An enormous silver bow sat neatly on top, shimmering in the pale winter light. Our parents, Robert and Diane, beamed as they handed her the keys, their faces glowing with pride. My name is Emma. And this was the moment I realized, without a doubt, that I had always been an afterthought in my own family's story. Oh my God. I can't believe you guys did this. Madison's voice rang out, clear and bright even through the thick glass. She was already sitting in the driver's seat, running her hands reverently over the steering wheel as though it were made of gold. I glanced down at the small pile of scratch-off lottery tickets resting on the countertop beside me, my own modest Christmas gifts for my family. They hadn't even bothered to open them yet. The tickets were all I could afford after pouring every last cent into my culinary school applications. Not that my parents would understand. To them, cooking had always been a hobby, not a career worth supporting. Emma, my mother's voice startled me. I turned to find her standing in the doorway, still wearing her coat. Why aren't you outside with everyone? Come see your sister's car. I forced a smile. Just finishing my coffee. Mom. She frowned, that all too familiar look of disappointment settling onto her face. You could try being happy for her. You know, this is a big moment. Right. Because I was the one who always made everything about myself. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Of course. How selfish of me. Don't start, she warned, her tone sharp. Not today. I bit my tongue and watched as she headed back outside. Through the window, I could see my father showing Madison how to adjust her mirrors, wearing the proud smile I had never been able to earn. Not when I made honor roll. Not when I won the regional cooking competition. Not even when I got accepted into culinary school before they refused to help with tuition. My fingers drifted toward the lottery tickets out of habit, picking one up and scratching absent-mindedly at the surface. It wasn't until I saw the third matching number that my heart stilled. I double-checked the ticket, my breath catching in my throat. $50,000. The realization hit me like a wave. With this money, I could afford culinary school. I could take the first real step toward opening my own restaurant. I could finally prove to everyone that my so-called hobby was worth something. But this ticket had been meant as a gift. The right thing would be to give it to them. To watch them celebrate another stroke of luck, one that would probably go straight into Madison's college fund or another extravagant family vacation I wouldn't be invited on. Outside, Madison honked the horn playfully, our parents laughing along with her. Not one of them had even noticed I wasn't there. I made my decision in that moment. Carefully, I folded the winning ticket and slipped it into my pocket. The rest of the scratch-offs I gathered up and dropped into the recycling bin. They wouldn't miss what they hadn't bothered to open. Emma, my father's voice boomed from outside. Get out here. We're taking a family picture. I walked to the front door, pausing with my hand on the knob. Through the glass, I could see them clustered around the car, their breath visible in the cold December air. They looked complete. The perfect family of three. Coming. I called back. But instead of joining them, I turned and headed upstairs. I had a laptop waiting on my desk, already open to apartment listings. Within an hour, I would have a place of my own. far away from this house where I had always felt like an outsider. As I finalized my application for a downtown studio, I felt the weight of the winning ticket pressing against my pocket. For the first time in my life, I had something that was mine, something that they couldn't take away. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting out. And thanks to their forgotten Christmas gift, I finally had my chance. The key felt heavier than I expected as I unlocked the door to my new apartment. The lock stuck for a moment before giving way. And with a deep breath, I stepped inside. It wasn't much, just a studio above a Thai restaurant in downtown Chicago, but it was mine. The scent of lemongrass and garlic drifted up through the floorboards, filling the space with warmth. I dropped my duffel bag onto the bare mattress in the corner and let out a long breath. 3 weeks had passed since Christmas, and my phone was still lighting up with missed calls from home. I had left a note explaining that I needed space, but that hadn't stopped the barrage of texts from my mother. Each one was more guilt-ridden than the last. "You're being selfish. Emma. Your sister needs you right now." I ignored the message and turned my focus to the few belongings I had brought with me. A roll of kitchen knives, a well-seasoned cast iron pan, and a handful of spices. These were the things that mattered. Everything else I could figure out later. A knock at the door made me freeze. For a brief moment, I imagined my parents standing outside, furious and demanding answers. But when I opened the door, it wasn't them. "Hello, new tenant." A man stood there, tall with salt and pepper hair tied back in a short ponytail. He wore a chef's jacket with a name embroidered on the chest, Marco Salgado. "Executive chef." "I noticed someone moving in," he said, gesturing to my boxes. "Wanted to introduce myself. We try to keep a family atmosphere here." The word family made me tense, but there was something about his warm smile that put me at ease. My eyes flickered to the knife roll on my mattress, and Marco followed my gaze. "You cook?" he asked. "I try to." I hesitated. "I'm starting culinary school next month." His eyes lit up. "No kidding. We're short-staffed downstairs. Could use someone who knows their way around a kitchen, part-time. If you're interested." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. My father's name flashed across the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Marco raised an eyebrow. "Complicated situation? You could say that." He nodded thoughtfully. "Listen. Come down tomorrow morning if you're interested. Sometimes the best therapy is keeping your hands busy and your knives sharp." After he left, I finally listened to my father's voicemail. His voice was gruff, irritated. "Your mother's upset. Madison's grades are slipping. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Time to grow up and come home." I deleted the message and opened my laptop, pulling up the culinary school website. The first tuition payment was due next week. My finger hovered over the submit payment button when another text came through, this time from Madison. "Mom and Dad are freaking out. Where are you? I'm worried." This one hurt more than the others. Madison and I had never been close, but she wasn't responsible for our parents' choices. Still, I couldn't risk telling her the truth. She had never been good at keeping secrets from them. "I'm safe," I typed back. "Just need some time." The next morning, I found myself in Marco's kitchen, chopping vegetables with more focus than necessary. The rhythmic motion was soothing, familiar. Marco worked beside me, occasionally offering quiet tips on technique. "You have good instincts," he said, watching as I adjusted the heat under a simmering sauce. "But you're angry. It shows in your cooking. Is that a bad thing?" He shrugged. "Depends what you do with it. Anger can fuel passion or destroy it. The difference is in the control." My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text from my mother. I ignored it. "The people who hurt us," Marco continued, tasting the sauce with a spoon. "They don't suffer when we let them consume our thoughts. They don't even know. The only one who suffers is us." I thought about the lottery ticket. About my silent escape. Sometimes. They need to learn they can't take people for granted. Marco handed me the spoon. Perhaps. But make sure your revenge doesn't become your purpose. Taste this. What's missing? I took a deep breath. Sampling the sauce. Salt. I said. And maybe a touch of acid. Marco smiled. Exactly. Balance is everything. In cooking and in life. I wasn't sure if my life would ever be balanced. But standing in that kitchen, for the first time in years, I felt like I was on my way to something real. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something that belonged solely to me. The hours in Marco's kitchen passed in a steady rhythm of chopping, stirring, and tasting. The hum of the restaurant filled the air, drowning out the echoes of my mother's guilt-laden texts and my father's frustrated voicemails. Cooking wasn't just an escape anymore, it was proof that I could stand on my own. But the past has a way of catching up with you. No matter how far you try to run. I had just finished the dinner rush when I heard a familiar voice from the doorway. Well. Lila Hawkins. Working in a back-alley restaurant. I'd say I'm surprised. But then again, we always knew you had a flair for the dramatic. I turned to find Brooke Stanton leaning against the counter, looking effortlessly polished in a crisp white chef's jacket. She had been a star in our high school's cooking club. The kind of girl who never had to fight for a spot in the culinary world because her family's money and connections paved the way for her. I set down my knife and folded my arms. What do you want, Brooke? She smirked. Oh, nothing much. Just catching up. You've been hard to find lately. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling. I ran into your mom at a charity event last week. She seemed very concerned about you. My stomach clenched. You talked to my mother? Brooke nodded, her expression sharp with amusement. She mentioned something about you stealing money and running away. Pretty dramatic. Even for you. I swallowed hard, my grip tightening on the edge of the counter. That's not what happened. No. She raised an eyebrow. Because I also heard from some investors I know that you've been shopping around a business plan for a restaurant. She tilted her head. Interesting timing. Considering. My hands began to tremble. What do you want, Brooke? She smiled. All sugar and poison. I'm just concerned about an old friend. That's all. Starting a restaurant takes more than just money. You know. It takes connections. Reputation. Stability. She lingered on the last word, letting the implication settle. Before I could respond, Marco's voice boomed from the kitchen doorway. Everything okay in here? Brooke's expression softened into something artificial. Of course. Chef. Just catching up with Emma. She straightened. Actually, I came to talk business. My restaurant is hosting a pop-up event next month, featuring promising new talent. We'd love to have Emma participate. Marco glanced at me, but I couldn't meet his eyes. I'll let her think about it, he said, his tone carefully neutral. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a kitchen to run. Brooke's smirk deepened as she slid her phone into her pocket. Think fast. Emma, you wouldn't want people to start asking the wrong questions about your finances. She left without another word. I gripped the counter, my breathing shallow. Marco was watching me, his expression unreadable. Want to tell me what that was about? He asked. I hesitated, then told him everything. About the lottery ticket. About my family. About how Brooke and my mother were now working together to turn my past into a weapon against me. Marco listened without judgment. When I finished, he simply handed me a towel to wipe my hands. So now you have a choice, he said. You can run again. Or you can face this head on. I swallowed. How? Brooke will destroy everything I've worked for. Marco picked up my knife, testing its edge. Will she? He met my gaze. Or will she just expose what you've been afraid to face? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it. It was a screenshot of an email, presumably from Brooke, to potential investors, detailing concerns about my financial irregularities and family issues. Marco exhaled. The pop-up event, he said. It could be an opportunity. I stared at the screen. Or it could be a trap. I whispered. Most likely both. Marco admitted. Then he smiled. But you're not that scared girl from Christmas morning anymore. I thought about the past few months. The burns. The late nights. The countless hours perfecting recipes. Each small victory had built something inside me that went beyond cooking. I met Marco's gaze. Tell her I'm in. He nodded. Now that sounds like a chef talking. The pop-up event was set for Saturday night at the Stanton House, Brooke's family-owned restaurant. A sleek, high-end place where the plating was pristine, and the clientele sipped wine worth more than my rent. This wasn't my world. But if I wanted to prove myself, I had to step into enemy territory. By mid-afternoon, the kitchen was buzzing with young chefs plating their signature dishes, each of us fighting for a chance to impress investors. I was assigned the worst prep station right by the drafty service door, where my burners kept running cold. I wasn't surprised. Brooke sauntered over, her expression syrupy sweet. Equipment issues, she asked, feigning concern. Such a shame. But working with subpar tools builds character, doesn't it? I ignored her, focusing on my dish. I had spent weeks perfecting it, a modern twist on my mother's signature recipe. It was my story on a plate. A balance of tradition and rebellion. 10 minutes before service, I reached for my sauce. My fingers met an empty counter. I froze. The container was gone. A slow wave of realization hit me. I had filled it just minutes ago. I turned, scanning the kitchen. That's when I saw Brooke, holding a familiar container. Oh, this, she said innocently. Found it by the sink. Looked spoiled. So I tossed it. Health and safety. You know. The room around me blurred. Months of work, gone in an instant. I gripped the edge of my station, my knuckles turning white. I had two choices, let her win or fight back. Then, through the crowd, I spotted Madison. She was standing by the dining room entrance, her camera slung over her shoulder. Our eyes met, and she gave me the smallest nod. I took a slow, steady breath. You want to sabotage me, Brooke? Fine. But I don't need your rules. Tessa, I called, motioning her over. Start filming. She raised her camera instantly. What are you doing? I picked up my knife. Making something better. I worked quickly, scraping together ingredients, letting instinct take over. If I couldn't serve my planned dish, I'd serve something rawer, more honest. I layered flavors, adjusted textures, turning my mother's classic into something new, something neither of them could claim. 20 minutes later, plates were placed in front of the investors. The room fell silent as they took their first bites. I watched their expressions shift from skepticism to curiosity to something I hadn't expected. Genuine appreciation. Brooke stepped forward, clearly unsettled. This isn't what was on your menu, she accused. No, I agreed, locking eyes with her. It's better. One of the investors turned to my mother. You must be so proud of her. Diane's lips parted, but no words came out. Madison caught the moment on camera. And for the first time, I didn't care what my mother thought. I had won. 6 months after the pop-up event, I stood in my own kitchen, watching the dinner service unfold. The restaurant was packed, just like it had been every night since opening. The walls were lined with Madison's photographs, artistic shots of our signature dishes, alongside candid moments from the journey that had brought us here. The door swung open, and Marco walked in, carrying an envelope. Special delivery, he said, handing it to me. Found this at my restaurant. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single note. I closed my restaurant last week. Turns out success isn't worth much when you build it on stolen recipes. You were right, the hunger has to be your own. It was from Brooke. I folded the letter and set it aside. Revenge had stopped tasting sweet somewhere along the way. What mattered now was the future I was building, one that no one could take away. Have you seen today's special? I asked Marco, nodding toward a dish waiting at the pass. He smiled, recognizing my mother's signature recipe reimagined, but with its heart intact. How did she take it? He asked. I laughed. She spent an hour critiquing everything I did wrong, while secretly eating every bite. Through the kitchen window, I saw my family at their regular table. My father was showing Madison something on her camera, and my mother, stoic as ever, kept glancing toward the kitchen. For the first time, there was something almost like pride in her eyes. Not perfect, but real. I picked up my knife and got back to work. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about proving you never needed their approval in the first place. Subscribe to the channel for more life stories.